A-10, Thunderbolt II's firepower and its return to war. It looks like a mistake. A jet built without a single elegant line, twin engines bolted high on its tail, a fat, ungainly fuselage, wings that seem too big for the body they carry. Pilots call it the Warthog. Officially, it's the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II. And for nearly 50 years, the United States Air Force has tried more than once to retire it. Every time, it has come back to war. This is the story of why an aircraft designed in the early 1970s is still flying combat missions in 2026, and of the weapon system, old and new, that keeps making it relevant. There's an old joke among ground crews. The A-10 isn't a plane with a gun on it. It's a gun with a plane wrapped around it. That's not far from the truth. At the center of the aircraft sits the GAU-8 Avenger, a 30mm 7-barrel Gatling-style cannon built by General Electric. It is, by a wide margin, the largest and heaviest rotary cannon ever fitted to an aircraft. The complete weapon, ammunition drum included, weighs over 4,000 pounds, heavier than a small car, mounted forward in an airframe designed around it, rather than the other way around. The gun fires standard loads of a 5-to-1 mixture, 4 armor-piercing incendiary rounds for every high-explosive incendiary round, cycling through a magazine that holds over 1,100 rounds. At its top rate of fire, the cannon can empty that magazine in under 20 seconds, though in practice, pilots fire in short 1- and 2-second bursts, both to conserve ammunition and to keep the barrels from overheating. The sound it makes has become almost as famous as the aircraft itself, a droning mechanical buzz rather than a rattle of individual shots, because the rate of fire is so high that human ears can't separate the rounds. Troops on the ground have a name for it too. They call it the BRT. But the gun's reputation isn't built on noise. It's built on precision. Despite firing nearly 4,000 rounds a minute, the GAU-8 is accurate enough that the majority of rounds land within a tight cone at range, accuracy good enough to hit a single vehicle from over a mile out in a single pass at 300 knots. That combination, brute force and surgical accuracy, is what the A-10 was built around from day one. In the early 1970s, American war planners looked at the doctrine of the Cold War and asked a blunt question. If Soviet tanks poured across the plains of Europe, what would stop them? The answer wasn't a fast jet. It was a slow one, slow enough to loiter over a battlefield, tough enough to survive small arms fire and shrapnel, and armed heavily enough to kill armor from the air, one pass at a time. Survivability isn't a footnote for the A-10, it's the design philosophy. The pilot sits inside what crews call the titanium bathtub, a bolted armor enclosure of titanium plate, roughly 500 kilograms of protection, built to stop rounds up to 23mm cannon fire. The twin engines are mounted high on the tail, both to keep them clear of ground fire and to shield their exhaust heat from infrared guided missiles fired from below. Redundant, widely separated flight control systems mean the aircraft can often keep flying even after suffering major structural damage. The fuel tanks are self-sealing. There is even a mechanical backup, cables and pulleys, that lets a pilot fly and land the jet manually if hydraulics fail entirely. Cold War planners built this aircraft assuming it would fly low, fly slow, and take hits. Decades of real combat, over Iraq, over Afghanistan, over Libya, over Syria. I've proven that assumption right more than once. Airframes have come home with engines shredded, tails perforated, wings holed clean through. And yet, for years, the Pentagon tried to retire it anyway. Since the early 2010s, the Air Force has argued that newer, faster, stealthier aircraft, above all the F-35 Lightning II, should take over the close air support mission the A-10 was built for. Budget planners see an aging airframe, a single mission design, and a maintenance bill that keeps climbing as the fleet gets older. Congress has repeatedly disagreed. Lawmakers approved the retirement of a small number of A-10s in the 2023 Defense Authorization Act, and more in 2024, with Air Force leadership at one point projecting the entire fleet would be gone by 2028 or 2029. But each round of cuts came with a condition. The Air Force had to show that something else could actually do the job the Warthog does, flying low, flying slow, and putting ordnance exactly where a soldier on a radio says it needs to go. That proof has been hard to deliver. Critics, including watchdog groups following the F-35 program, have pointed out that F-35 pilots receive little dedicated close air support training, even as the jet is marketed as the A-10's eventual replacement. Of the roughly 715 A-10s originally built, close to 600 have already been retired or scrapped over the program's lifetime. Congress has kept a floor under the number that remain, barring the fleet from dropping below roughly 100 aircraft through at least September 2026. Then, in the spring of 2026, the debate was overtaken by events. In 2026, war broke out involving Iran, and American air power moved into the region in force. Aircraft carriers and stealth bombers drew the headlines, as they usually do. But a quieter story was unfolding closer to the water, over the Strait of Hormuz, where Iranian fast attack boats and one-way explosive drones too threatened commercial and military shipping alike. The Air Force sent A-10's U.S. Central Command confirmed that A-10s were flying combat missions within the first 24 hours of the conflict. A senior American general later said the aircraft were being used specifically to hunt and kill fast attack watercraft in the strait, exactly the kind of close, low-altitude, high-precision work the airframe was designed for, just against boats instead of tanks. Squadrons deployed to bases across the region, including forward positions in the UAE, flying overwatch missions above Gulf shipping lanes and intercepting Iranian drones headed for tankers and warships. Ground crews began fitting the jets with 600-gallon external fuel tanks, a configuration rarely used on the A-10 in the past, extending each aircraft's time over the target area by up to an hour. In Iraq, A-10s also flew missions against Iranian-backed militia groups blamed for attacks on American positions, including strikes near the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad. Faced with an aircraft still finding missions no one else could fly as well, the Secretary of the Air Force announced in April 2026 that the A-10's retirement, long planned, long delayed, would be pushed back again, this time to 2030. The Warthog had done what it has always done. It got a stay of execution by proving itself in a war nobody expected it to fly in. This is where the story of the gun meets a newer story, about a rocket. For decades, the A-10 carried unguided 70mm rockets alongside its cannon and its guided bombs. Reliable, but imprecise. Most useful against area targets rather than single fast-moving threats. In the 2026 conflict, that changed. The aircraft went to war carrying something genuinely new, the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, known as APKWS-2. It isn't a NAS-U rocket built from scratch. It's a guidance kit, built by BAE Systems, that slides onto an existing unguided Hydra 70 rocket and turns it into a laser-guided precision weapon. Small fins on the front carry laser seekers. Flapperons at the rear steer the rocket onto target mid-flight. The system also added new proximity fuses and a laser-to-infrared handoff feature, letting a pilot lock a rocket onto one target and then shift attention to a second threat, while the first weapon completes its own attack automatically. Over the Gulf, that capability turned out to matter enormously. A-10s began flying with a dedicated 7-round APKWS pod, using the newly precise rockets against two very different threats: Shahed 136 exploding drones inbound toward ships, and small, fast Iranian attack boats maneuvering through the strait, targets far too fast, small and close to friendly shipping for the older unguided rockets to be trusted against. It's a strange kind of irony. An aircraft built in the 1970s to kill Soviet tanks with a cannon has, in 2026, become one of the US military's most effective tools against 21st-century drone swarms and small boat threats. Not because the airframe changed, but because the weapon riding underneath its wings finally caught up to the moment. Strip away the nostalgia, and the case for the A-10 comes down to a handful of blunt facts. It's slow, cruising around 300 knots, and that's not a weakness in this mission, it's the point. Flying low and slow gives a pilot time to visually confirm a target, to distinguish friendly troops from hostile ones, to hold fire until the picture is certain. Faster jets, flying higher for their own survivability, often can't do that as reliably. It's tough, built from the start to absorb battle damage that would ground almost anything else in the inventory. And it's now flexible in a way its original designers never planned for. A cannon built to kill tanks, now paired with a rocket system precise enough to kill a drone in mid-air or a speedboat weaving across open water. The Air Force has said more than once that the A-10's time is almost up. Congress and the battlefield have kept disagreeing. As of 2026, retirement is scheduled again, for 2030. Whether that date holds may depend less on budget projections in Washington than on what happens the next time American forces need something flying low, flying slow, and hitting exactly what it's aimed at. History suggests it usually gets one more mission. Note on accuracy. This script is built from verified reporting, US Air Force and CENTCOM statements, defense press coverage of the 2026 Iran conflict, and technical specifications of the GAU-8 cannon and APKWS-2 rocket system. It does not correspond to the vague new ammunition test headline you referenced, which traces back to generic, unverified clickbait video titles rather than a specific documented test event.